Thessaloniki, the Holy Mountain of Athos, one being one of the largest and most prominent cities of the ancient world, and the other being the most remote and insulated spiritual harbor of asceticism. Two opposite realities, yet one common theology and holy mission. Thessaloniki, Mount Athos, pillars of Byzantium. Founded in 315 BC by Alexander the Great, the city of Thessaloniki was named after his half-sister Thessaloniki of Macedon. Throughout its history, it retained its autonomy and parliament from the Macedonian to Roman and eventually Byzantine empires, which means that it never had a foreign governor or garrison of soldiers quartered within its city limits. This was an extremely rare characteristic of the time, and the only city that Paul and the early apostles visited that could claim such freedom. Previously, there was a famous canal and harbor that was established in Thessaloniki by Xerxes in 483 BC during the Second Persian invasion of Europe. It remained one of the world's great dockyards throughout the Roman and Byzantine empires. Over the next 300 years, Thessaloniki would grow into the preeminent capital of Macedonia, supplanting Athens in the process. And eventually, it would be boasted as being the second largest city in the emerging Roman Empire, totaling over 200,000 inhabitants during the time of Christ. And, for a time, it was considered as another option for the eastern capital of the empire instead of Constantinople. Keep in mind, at the time, there were only 300 million people living in the world compared to the 8 billion that live here now. In today's terms, that would have been equivalent of a major metropolitan city of about 5.3 million, or roughly the size of Los Angeles and Philadelphia combined. In addition to the city's unparalleled political and economic influence in the empire, unquestionably the most important feature of the city was that it lay on the Egnatian Road, a road that bridged from Dyrrhachium on the Adriatic Sea and Constantinople on the Bosphorus. This was the main street that linked the east and the west, and was known as the Lap of Rome, and it gave Thessaloniki the distinction and title of being known as the Golden Gate during the first century. There was a large synagogue in the Anapolis, or the Upper City, not far from the large city walls that overlooked the entire city and southern seawall. Paul and Silas stayed in Thessaloniki with one of their first young converts, St. Jason, whose house was just a few hundred yards from the synagogue. Paul's time in the city is recorded in Acts chapter 17, verses 1 through 10, where he preached in the synagogue for 3 Sabbaths. Yet in that short time, he had such an impact that the Jewish leaders arrested his host Jason and sought to kill him and Silas. The intense pressure from the Jewish leaders forced Paul and Silas to be smuggled out of the city from a small hole in the city wall near Jason's house and flee to Berea. A monastery known as the Vlatathis Monastery was established and is still functioning at the site of Jason's home and this opening in the city wall. And there are 3 cathedrals built on the site of the ancient synagogue where Paul preached, the largest of which houses his venerable relics. Admittedly, he and Silas did not manage to have the success that they hoped to in converting Jews to Christianity. However, their message did ring true in the ears and hearts of the pagan Greek population, as well as several leading women of local society. Ultimately, what these 3 weeks told Paul was that if he could accomplish that much in just a short time, why could he not win the entire Roman Empire for Christ? This is the context in which he is writing his 2 letters addressed to the Thessalonians, found in the New Testament. Readers can feel in the text Paul's incredible interest and anxiety as he monitors how this new and critical mission community is working out. It is for this reason that Paul immediately sends Timothy back to Thessaloniki when he meets him in Athens, as we read in 1 Thessalonians chapter 3. It is impossible to overstress the importance of the arrival of Christianity to Thessaloniki. If it could get its foot in that city, Christianity would be able to reach the entire civilized region on both sides of the Egnatian Road, east and west. This was the beginning of Christianity's claim to becoming a world religion. Paul's hope that this city would be the launching point for the spreading of the gospel of Christ to the farthest reaches of the civilized world came to fruition in ways he couldn't have imagined. During the mid to late 9th century, the spiritual witness of Thessaloniki began fueling new communities to the north and east. The Slavonic churches of Bulgaria, Moravia, Serbia, and Russian and others owe their Christian tradition to the influence of Thessaloniki, and specifically the saints Cyril and Methodius, who hailed from there. These saints were brothers by blood and devoted their lives to ministering to these new churches in their native language and according to their cultural expressions and customs. It is not outrageous to suggest that without Thessaloniki, the roughly 220 million Orthodox Christians in Eastern Europe and Russia would have never been Christianized. Now, fast forwarding a few hundred years, during the Latin siege of Constantinople in the Fourth Crusade, between 1204 and 1261 AD, the center of ecclesiastical art, architecture, and theology shifted decidedly to Thessaloniki. The city became the most influential player in Orthodox Church history, not only within Greece and the Mediterranean, but also to these new northeastern Slavonic regions as well. This sphere of influence was enhanced by its proximity to Mount Athos, that had been growing ever since the 5th century and was reaching the pinnacle of popularity between the 10th and 15th centuries. With Thessaloniki leading the Orthodox cathedral rite of city worshippers, and Mount Athos serving as the monastic heartbeat of the world, these two locales combined to form the driving forces of Orthodox Christianity on a global scale. After the Fourth Crusade, Thessaloniki entered into perhaps its most historically notable period, the Palaiologan dynasty. This was an era marred by civil wars and shrinking borders for the Byzantine Empire. Nonetheless, academia, legal studies, literature, theology, music, visual arts, and architecture were all flowering in Thessaloniki like never before. Partly contributing to this local renaissance was that the Palaiologi imperial family moved their primary residence to Thessaloniki, officially making it the Byzantine Empire's second capital. For large spans of time, from the 13th to 14th centuries, Palaiologi emperors and their families lived in Thessaloniki. Still to this day, visitors to the city can find their names inscribed in ruins and ancient gates all across Thessaloniki. Following the fall of Constantinople in 1453 by the Ottomans, Thessaloniki was even more crucial to the continuation of global orthodoxy. The impacts of the next 4 centuries of intellectual, social, and economic backwardness was debilitating for the formerly great Hellenic, Macedonian, and Byzantine empires. Yet this prolonged and intense period of persecution also unified the Christian communities in a way that hadn't been previously possible. As the eastern islands of Greece were falling under Turkish rule, more and more leaders of society and the church were moving to Thessaloniki. The city of Thessaloniki, together with Mount Athos, became the largest promoters of Orthodox thought and expression in the world during the post-Byzantine era. It's easy to recognize the lasting impact of these two powerhouses of Christianity and Hellenism in the 2 centuries since the liberation of the Grecian state from Turkey. The legacy of the great city of Thessaloniki is a timeless one, spanning not 1, not 2, but 3 empires. And that legacy is still apparent